Teagan and Chile, good here in the National Veterans Resource Center, just outside
Technical difficulties are apologies. The Supreme Court has ruled that former President Donald Trump has to turn in nearly 6 years of tax returns. We'll have more on who's getting access and why.
Plus, the World Cup in Qatar has seen controversy over the country's human rights violations. We've got more on the political background of the world's biggest sporting event. Talking Point starts right now. Congressman John Katko was on campus this evening giving SU saying farewell to Congress. Welcome to Talking Points. I'm Chilekasi, Adele.
And I'm Teagan Brown. Katko was on campus tonight reflecting on his tenure, serving the people of Central New York in the House of Representatives.
Now, joining us live from outside the NVRC where Katko delivered his farewell address is Jake Morel. Jake, what did the congressman have to say?
Teagan and Chile, good evening. I'm here inside the National Veterans Resource Center, just outside the KG Tan Auditorium, where just about an hour ago, Congressman John Katko finished up giving his official retirement speech. Now, during the speech, Katko had several ideas and policies that he had during his 8 years in office, but none more than the idea of bipartisanship. Katko was a part of the Congressional Problem-Solving Caucus, a caucus of both Democratic and Republican congressmen that worked to push bills through. Now, speaking of those bills, when asked about his most proud legislation in his 8 years in office, Katko said it was working across the aisle to get the infrastructure bill passed.
Throughout my time in Congress, what drove me to go to Congress was the frustration to see how people fight and people just are banging heads all the time. And for me, I wanted to go to Congress. I wanted to surround myself with staff in Congress that wanted to solve serious problems, and doing so, focusing on unifying issues, not the ones that divide us, the ones that can unify us and should unify us.
Katko said that approaching bills with an open mind and a willingness to be bipartisan is the way to get work done in Washington. Teagan?
Well, Jake, Katko was one of the Republicans who voted against former President Donald Trump on January 6th, potentially alienating himself from the party moving forward. Katko, that is. What did the congressman have to say about Trump and January 6th?
Yeah, Katko addressed the January 6th attack by simply saying that as a leader in Congress, or any political for that matter, you have to do what's right. He didn't go too in depth in talking about the insurrection, the attack. He did say that should put their morals over their politics and that people should do what's right.
And Jake, speaking of that controversy of January 6th, you know, we talk about this division that's gone on in our country for the past how many years now. How did Katko address that division that America faces today?
Chile, Katko addressed the division in the country today by referencing some history and talking about the 70s and 80s and 2000s. High inflation and lots of economic and a lot of division. Just said to have faith in America and that things end up okay in America and that people should be kind to their neighbors. They should be kind to other voters. No political stance, and they should have open political dialogue. And just like him, they should be ready to reach to work on their America.
Apologies for those technical difficulties. Last week, shots were fired at a Walmart in Chesapeake, Virginia. As gun violence across our nation continues, Talking Points analyst Katie Fongvongsa joins us to discuss how President Biden has reacted in recent days.
Teagan, thank you. In the past week, the U.S. has experienced 2 major mass shootings, adding to its growing total in 2022. President Biden is still reinforcing his stance on gun reform and has been advocating for it since his term.
In wake of a Chesapeake, Virginia Walmart shooting, President Biden is continuing to push a ban on assault weapons. This month, there already have been shootings, including an LGBTQ+ club in Colorado Springs and another one at the University of Virginia. In sum, just this year, the U.S. has had over 600 mass shootings, which is defined as 4 or more people are shot. At the end of November, we are short of the recent records of 690 mass shootings of 2021. Biden and other leaders are trying to push for gun reform, but face opposition in the House now that it is controlled by the Republicans. Biden spoke about what he has done so far in response to the Club Q shooting. We must address the public health epidemic of gun violence in all forms. I signed the most significant gun safety law in nearly 3 decades, but we must do more. And we must drive out the inequities that contribute to violence against LGBTQI+ people. We cannot tolerate hate. Less than a week later on Thanksgiving, Biden commented on the Virginia Walmart shooting. The idea we still allow semi-automatic weapons to be purchased is sick, just sick. I'm going to try to get rid of assault weapons. That same day, Governor Glenn Youngkin released a statement about Chesapeake and Charlottesville. He has yet to mention anything about gun rights. The U.S. is still divided between those for and against the general Second Amendment. This shows support or solid votes from the opposing party are unchanging, even when gun rights appeared on the electoral ballots in the midterms weeks ago. Moving forward, Biden plans to negotiate with Congress about addressing assault weapons.
So, Katie, one of the things we were talking about with Jake just now is about division with America. You know, some of the things we talk about with Congress and these Republican votes in the House on banning assault weapons, will President Biden be able to get some of those votes to change? And if so, how?
So we're taking a look at this now, and we're seeing that President Biden currently has low odds of achieving this goal. He is calling for a ban on high-powered semi-auto assault rifles, and he actually addressed this in the beginning of his political term back in the 1990s. And so he brought back a 1994 ban, or he is trying to, on restrictions on manufacture and sales with the help of the Democratic Party back then, and shootings were actually able to decline until 2004, until that expired. And currently he needs about 60 votes from each party on each side. And he also would be calling for a background check that is extensive, and if there are sales as a primary income of sales, they must be registered.
Now, Katie, Biden's response is banning assault weapons here, but what can we expect from state leaders as gun violence continues across the U.S.?
And so state leaders do have some jurisdiction, and although most leaders are calling for a federal enactment, as I said, that's not very possible at this moment. It might take up to 2 years to pass through the government. But currently, we're seeing that 3 out of 10 Republicans want to keep the gun laws as is, and 9 out of 10 Democrats want to change that rule and overrule it. When we can take a look at Marjorie's Dominic Douglas, where Representative Rick Scott signed in gun control laws, and that would also need some permanent training classes and conceal and carry.
And Katie, holding into something affecting New York, the gunman in the Buffalo Top shooting pleading guilty to murder and terrorism charges earlier today. How are politicians and notable activists responding to this development?
So a little bit before the show, I saw that Ben Crump, a civil activist attorney, had spoke about calling for justice and needing state and federal advocates for full justice on the 10 innocent souls taken, per he says. And also other activists are saying that this has now been 6 months since the Buffalo shooting, and we're using it as a central point of how shootings are occurring since then, and it's just calling.
Katie Fongvongsa, thank you so much. Protests have erupted across China against the Communist Party's zero-COVID policy. The unrest was caused by a deadly apartment building fire last week that claimed the lives of 10 people. Videos of the incident appeared to show that lockdown measures put in place by the Chinese government delayed firefighters from reaching the victims. The White House issued a statement this morning saying that everyone has the right to peacefully protest, including the Chinese, but did not offer any indication of support for the demonstrators.
California Governor Gavin Newsom has told President Biden that he will not challenge him for the Democratic nomination in 2 years' time. Newsom won the Golden State in a landslide and has been a vocal critic of Donald Trump and other potential GOP candidate, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Many Democrats have hoped Newsom could run as a younger alternative to Biden, who turned 80 last week. But according to Politico, Newsom called the president on election night and told him he's, quote, all in if Biden runs in 2024. As for what comes next for Newsom, the governor would not rule out a bid for president in 2028.
Coming up on Talking Points, former President Donald Trump was recently seen dining with a white supremacist at his Mar-a-Lago estate. We'll have more on the dinner after the break.
When I hear the alarm bell go off in school, I think it's an air raid.
A lot of houses in our neighborhood have been destroyed. I like to close my ears and sing songs whenever the bombs come close.
I'm worried our new neighbors won't like us.
But I know it's all gonna be worth it. I just want my family to be safe. But these are not my words.
These are not my words.
These are not my words.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Donald Trump launched his 2024 presidential campaign just 1 week after the midterm elections. But he's already hit a roadblock. Trump recently dined with two high-profile anti-Semites at his Mar-a-Lago estate. Talking Points analyst Luke Radel is here with the details on the dinner. Now, Luke, a lot of people are talking about this dinner at the former president's country club. How did this even come about?
Yeah, so according to what President Trump has been saying on his social media platform, Truth Social, Kanye West, who now goes by Ye, decided that he wanted to go to Mar-a-Lago and meet with Trump. President Trump said that he accepted it to help a seriously troubled man who just happens to be black. He said that at the dinner, Ye expressed no anti-Semitism, but brought along with him three guests that President Trump says he didn't know who they were. One of them was Nick Fuentes, who is a prominent white supremacist and Holocaust denier, someone who a lot of people have said has very controversial and racist views, frankly. And this pattern from President Trump of saying that he didn't know this person is one we've seen from him before. It's one he said about David Duke, the leader of the Ku Klux Klan, back in 2016. It's one he said about the Proud Boys during the 2020 debate. So he's frequently said that he didn't know these people, but he did have dinner with Nick Fuentes and Kanye West at Mar-a-Lago.
And now, Luke, we've seen social media reacting to, Trump and Kanye or Ye's relationship, the past few years. But right now, how are we seeing the Republican Party react to this dinner?
It's been really interesting to see how Republicans react, because a lot of times Republicans will stay quiet on this. And we are seeing a little bit of that. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley says, I suppose he can have dinner with whomever he wants. Some Republicans say, we think that he'd be better served having dinner with other people. But we are seeing a pretty sizable number of Republicans coming out and condemning former President Trump for doing this. Chris Christie, who is a Trump ally and then oftentimes critic and just an honest leader in the Republican Party, says that it shows an awful lack of judgment from Trump. It makes him a bad candidate for the Republicans in 2024. We also saw Trump's anti-Semitism czar, a person he hired for the State Department to fight anti-Semitism, come out and say that President Trump needs to condemn the views of people like Ye and Nick Fuentes that are largely anti-Semitic. And that's another thing that a conservative commentator, Ben Shapiro, said, was that Kanye West came out and made some pretty anti-Semitic comments too. So for Trump to say he didn't know Nick Fuentes, he does know Kanye, and he could come out and condemn the views that he's espoused.
And Luke, I'll quickly ask this on the flip side. Democrats, how is President Biden reacting to this dinner? And could it make him more likely to announce a campaign sooner rather than later?
One of the main reasons President Biden gave for running for president in 2020 was the fact that he believes that President Trump is a racist. And so we've seen in recent days the White House came out with a statement condemning the actions by former President Trump, saying, quote, bigotry, hate, and anti-Semitism have absolutely no place in America, including at Mar-a-Lago. Holocaust denial is repugnant and dangerous, and it must be forcefully condemned. So President Biden was said to be mulling over a potential bid for re-election. He's expected to announce that early next year, but during his Thanksgiving break at Nantucket, he's been discussing it with family, and it's very possible that this dinner could factor into that.
Luke Radel, thank you so much. And we'll go to Chilekasi with more Donald Trump news.
Teagan, thank you. It will be very interesting to see how that affects the 2024 race. The Supreme Court has ruled that House Democrats can have access to Trump's tax returns. Trump has, for years, refused to share his financial documents with the public. In past campaigns, most other presidential candidates have released their tax records for the sake of transparency. The former president has blasted the decision on his social media platform, Truth Social. Here with us now is Talking Points analyst Noah Gutfleisch to break down what this decision means. So, Noah, what will the Democrats in the House Ways and Means Committee do with Trump's tax returns?
Well, the issue is that they got it at a very bad time, since they lost control of the House a few weeks ago, and they will only have control of the House until the Christmas break, which is the end of December. So they only have a couple of weeks to actually look at this and really break it down and see what is going on with his tax returns. But so it seems like they really won't have much time. They could try to rush it through. House Means and Ways Committee Chairman Richard Neal has indicated that they will try to do that, but it's not clear if they could really get it out besides just leaking it to the public.
And Noah, recently the former president announcing he will make a second run at the term in the White House. Will this decision have any impact on his latest campaign?
Well, I think that people have known that Trump has gotten some loopholes and has not paid his fair share of taxes. We saw the New York Times publish that he only paid $750 in both 2016 and 2017 because of business losses. So much of the public does know that he has not paid his fair share of taxes and has had some loopholes because of his business losses. So I don't think it'll impact that much, since this is kind of just going to say what we already know. Besides that, it will show that he's not very transparent, which could be an issue. And besides that, there really won't be much impact besides just his transparency, and his character flaws could possibly show because of that.
And we'll keep watching it for sure. Noah, thank you. Coming up on Talking Points, we'll have more on the controversy surrounding the World Cup in Qatar. Stay with us.
Dad?
Just 1 minute, okay?
Hey, Bobo, do trees tell each other stories?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, why don't we go find out? Listen.
Do clouds take naps?
I couldn't tell you.
Can birds draw pictures?
I don't have an answer for that.
Dad, do stars visit their friends?
Look!
Welcome back to Talking Points. Let's talk soccer. We're a week into the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar, but these games have been under scrutiny for years.
Talking Points analyst Dominic Chiappone is here in studio to break down why this year's FIFA World Cup continues to be marred with controversy and scandal. Dominic?
Thanks, guys. Well, the big story for the 2022 World Cup should be what's happening on the soccer field. Instead, it's what's going on off of it that's dominated the headlines for this year's World Cup. Let's start off by first asking the question, why Qatar? Back in 2010, FIFA awarded Qatar the rights to host this year's World Cup. Now, that already was a huge red flag. According to Bloomberg.com, Qatar needed to build over 100 hotels and 9 host sites or stadiums within the country. Despite having an ethnic population of just over 300,000 Qataris
Qataris on paper, the math didn't work out to have the World Cup infrastructure needed to be done by this year. And then there's the accusations of bribery among FIFA officials. According to the New York Times, 3 members of the voting body were accused of receiving bribe money from Qatar. And since 2010, more than half of the 22 individuals who voted to have this year's World Cup in Qatar were either accused of or charged with corruption. Now, this has all been in the back of the U.S.'s mind for years. Here's U.S. Senator Jerry Moran speaking on corruption's influence in international soccer back in 2015. Take a listen.
By shining light on the corruption, bribery, and other criminal activity that has been a part of international soccer for far too long, my hope is that the American people, current and future sponsors, and media companies that support the games today will better understand the consequences of allowing the organizations governing soccer to continue without reform, including the tragic loss of life.
Now, in that same video, Senator Moran cited a study that over 4,000 workers would die before the first ball is kicked in Qatar. That turned out to be an understated count. See, the real story that matters is the many atrocities Qatar swept under the rug to host this year's World Cup. The biggest of which has been the harsh mistreatment of workers. To build all of the infrastructure needed, Qatar trapped 90% of its current non-Qatari population in what's called kafala. According to the Council on Foreign Relations, kafala is a labor system that gives private companies in mostly Middle Eastern countries near total control over migrant workers' employment and immigration status. On your screen right now, you can see where Qatar got most of its foreign labor workforce, mainly from India, Nepal, and Bangladesh. Qatar has been accused of undermining just how bad workers are being treated. The Guardian found that there have been 6,500 worker deaths in building everything needed for the World Cup. Now, here's where things get interesting. Qatar says only 37 migrant workers have died since 2010 and that 3 of them were, quote, work-related. But a later study from Amnesty International found that nearly 70% of the deaths of Indian, Nepali, and Bangladeshi nationals were attributed to, quote, natural causes or cardiac arrest by the Qatari government. So clearly, Qatar's transparency hasn't been the best, and all of this doesn't even scratch the surface of the many human rights violations the nation has been accused of. For starters, fans aren't allowed to wear rainbow clothing because Qatar sees it as a symbol of the LGBTQ+ community, and journalists' lives have also been put at risk given the nation's tough stance on freedom of speech and freedom of the press. So yes, the 2022 World Cup will be filled with all the thrills, goals, and excitement. That is a certainty. But what's also a certainty is that Qatar, and to an extent FIFA, prioritize profits over people to put the World Cup on in the first place. Teagan and Chile, back to you guys.
Dominic, thank you. As Russia's invasion of Ukraine continues into the winter, the war may be entering into a new stage. Heavy snow is set to hit the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv as military conflict continues.
In recent days, Russia has continued its attacks on Ukrainian energy supplies. And here to break down the effects of the changing season is Talking Points analyst Jacob Bernardini. Jacob, Ukraine has made advances recently to take back regions from the Russian military. What's changed recently in Russia's military strategy after some of these losses?
Well, they made a lot of gains down in the southern parts of Ukraine, mainly near Kherson recently, and these have been big victories for Ukraine. So Russia's decided to take a different approach and has started to do progressive artillery shelling throughout the region. Kherson is one of those regions. They're attacking a lot of residential areas around there. Kyiv is also one of those areas, mainly trying to target energy depots and taking out heat supply. Ukraine is struggling to gain those back as the winter sets in.
And Jacob, as we're seeing, the seasons change, we're going into winter. This means kind of a shift for both sides. It's something neither, Ukraine or Russia has fought in. So how are both sides changing and adjusting to this?
Well, it's going to change a lot of how the war is fought. Now, it's going to expect a lot of long-range offensive weaponry, mainly with the Russia's artillery shellings, and for Ukraine, it's going to be sort of bunkering down. They're trying to recover a lot of their power and heating right now. It's going to lead to a lot of muddy terrain and rough conditions, so expect the fighting to get very fierce. And Ukraine doesn't know exactly what to do about this because they're trying to figure out what list of supplies they need for the winter in order to apply that to their aid that they're going to ask foreign countries for in recent weeks.
Now, in the beginning of Russia's invasion on Ukraine, a lot of people didn't know how long Ukraine, their forces were going to last. But one reason why they've been able to keep fighting this long is due to the large amount of foreign aid from countries like this one, the United States. With Republicans now controlling the House post-midterms set to take place in January, how will this change how aid to Ukraine is given?
Well, Congress just passed another aid package to Ukraine a couple of days ago, but they're trying to get another one done in December, mainly because they are concerned about Republican control of the House and how that's going to impact how much funds are sent. Kevin McCarthy said they want to audit more of those funds, make sure everything is make sure it's smaller packages, audit, make sure everything's going the right place. The Freedom Caucus wants to just cut those entirely in some cases. So it's going to be very interesting to see if they can get something done in December and how aid will progress as the Congress takes its new term.
Jacob Bernardini, thank you so much. And coming up on Talking Points, we'll preview the upcoming runoff election for the Georgia Senate between Republican Herschel Walker and Democrat Raphael Warnock. Stick with us.
Your first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes? B, console her?
Don't worry, sweetie. This is gonna happen a lot.
Or C, find her a new boyfriend?
Nice single boys. That was weird.
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Let's finish and talk about runoffs. Early voting has begun. The runoff election for Georgia Senate just a few weeks ago. Both Republican Herschel Walker and Democrat Raphael Warnock unable to receive 50% of the vote. And Teagan, it looks like Raphael Warnock may have an edge if these early voting numbers we're seeing have any impact on what we're going to see on Election Day.
Yeah, I mean, we saw 180,000 people come out, including Warnock himself. Walker did not come out for this early voting. But of course, as we've seen continuously, early voting seems to be a more Democratic turnout than Republican turnout.
And not just the fact that more people are turning out in Georgia as well, but some of the demographics, you can see it. A tenth of the voters aged 18 through 24. Black Georgians, also over 46% of turnout so far in this early voting. And if we know anything about generally where those demographics lead, and if we're going to make inclinations about what that means, it looks like it's going to advantage Warnock.
Yeah, and this isn't, as dependent on as it was just a few weeks ago for midterms, because Democrats already have the majority here.
Definitely. And, I think one of the interesting things as well, Trump not campaigning publicly for Walker, both campaigns said that it's not in the best interest. So something to watch there as we head towards the runoff day.
It definitely is, and we'll have an update next week, but that is our show for this evening. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram for the latest in Citrus TV News. I'm Teagan Brown.
And I'm Chilekasi, Adele. We're back next week, same time, same place. Until then, good night.